Very good morning to you. Welcome, marketers. Welcome, PR people. Welcome, everybody who's in our marketing and advertising space in South Africa. It's so lekker to have you with us as part of the IAB Insight series. I know it's been a really long week because it's a short week and all of those things need to be done in a very short space of time. And I'm sure all of you are very stressed and overwhelmed with what needs to happen. But in our very fast and dynamic moving world, I'm really glad that you've made some time for us today just to kind of continue your learning journey, especially as the marketing and advertising industry is evolving at such a rapid pace. The IAB is really here to keep you sort of at the front of what's happening in the world around you. You would have seen that I've popped a little message in the chat already just to welcome you all to this webinar. I'm so glad to have you with us today. If you want to just let us know where you're from, maybe your name, your title, what company you're from today, and very excited to engage all of you on the webinar. It's such an exciting topic. We've been covering so much within this AI automation world, and the feedback has been phenomenal. So we really do appreciate all of the Q&A questions. We appreciate all of the messages in the chat and your heavy engagement in what is exactly going to be the biggest change coming to our industry in the next sort of 3 to 5 years as well too. We're very excited to see what it does for us. And like I mentioned, as part of the IAB, we're here to guide you through that journey. My name is Danilo Acquisto. I'm the CEO of a digital agency called Special Effects Media, and I'm going to be your host for today, making sure that everything runs smoothly and all your questions get answered by our two valuable speakers today. So if you do have any questions for them and you'd like us to address those in our Q&A at the end of this session, I do ask that you post those in the Q&A box. It's right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll see at the bottom there a chance to add in your Q&A questions. Today's topic, dynamic content generation in marketing and advertising. It's episode 51 of the IAB Insight series. We all know that as marketers, we're really challenged to focus on our consumer, and we're really focused on hyper-personalization. How do we get the right message to the right person in the right stage of their journey in our mix? Today, our two speakers are going to cover that topic for us today. We're first going to cover how to foster collaboration between creatives, marketers, creatives, and technologists. We do understand that this world of hyper-personalization does require all three of those. We're then going to discover how dynamic content generation enables hyper-personalization. And then third, we're going to dive deeper into the unique content consumption behaviors and preferences when it comes to using Gen AI. Our two speakers today are incredible. Robin Edwards, she's the Senior Marketing Manager and Brand Manager at FinChoice. And our second speaker, Kangalani Dziba. He's the Group Divisional Head for PR and Influencer Partnerships at Wraps Creative Agency. And both of them are going to cover the topics between the two of them. And like I mentioned, we will get into a Q&A at the end of the conversation. So really, what you ask in the Q&A will guide our specialists on helping you answer these questions that you do have. Our sponsors for the episode, we're really grateful for them. Without them, we wouldn't be able to have the teams that put these webinars together and all the content. A big thank you to Biz Community, Ornico, the Marketing Association of South Africa, Everlytic, as well as Roamwork, who make all of this possible. In fact, we're sitting there today. So very excited to have this webinar with you this morning. We've got little time and lots of content to get through, so I thought we'd dive straight in with our first speaker. Robin Edwards, as mentioned, is the Senior Marketing and Brand Manager at FinChoice. She's got 15 years of marketing experience in our industry. She really does have a proven track record with multiple channel mixes, as well as various sized budgets. And I know we all like to talk about budget when it comes to Gen AI. In her current role as Senior Manager and Brand Manager at FinChoice, she oversees team management, creative process management, cost management, brand management, demand management, marketing execution, communication within the marketing department, ensuring alignment with brand strategy and optimizing performance metrics. And I know she's going to talk us through quite a lot that we need to know in our mix of how to be able to understand the background when preparing for Gen AI and hyper-personalization. Robin, can be spotlighted to our screen, please? Robin, it's so lovely to have you with us today on our Zoom webinar. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm quite excited to be here, Danilo.
All good. I've added your spotlight there. Oops, now we've removed ourselves from that spotlight. There we go. Now we can see you on our screen. How are you doing this morning? You said you're good. Were you drove to Cape Town?
Cape Town. A little bit nervous, a
Cape
little
Town.
bit cold.
Yeah, that cold front is not really a cold front. Us Cape Townians always moan. It's never good enough. It's either too windy or it's too rainy or it's too sunny. We're never too sure.
That's for sure.
Right, Robin, I'm going to leave the stage for you. Take us through your 4 key things to land when it comes to dynamic content generation. The stage is yours.
Thanks so much. First up, Marty, can I get the poll up? Can everyone please vote for my poll? So the question today is, are you currently exploring or looking into or trying to implement dynamic content generation in your marketing implementation at the moment? Please vote, audience. Great stuff. Do we have results yet?
We've got about 45 votes through. Give it a few seconds. More people voting. We're now sitting at critical mass. You've got about 80% answered. I think we can launch now.
Awesome. Great. So 78% of you are in the right place. So I'm glad you're here today and happy to have a chat with you. The good news is that no one is getting dynamic content generation for hyper-personalization right at the moment. But what I am going to leave you with at the moment, or for today, are 4 key steps for you to consider to land your dynamic content generation in your day-to-day execution. First up, I need to highlight the importance of the customer. So dynamic content generation for personalization isn't necessarily about winning awards, forgive me, Kangilane, but it is also about meeting customer needs, making sure that the barriers around accessibility, language, and choice for customer are addressed within your execution. So it's important for whatever implementation plan you go with, that you focus on the customer and that it is customer focused. So let me jump into the first step. So understanding your customer segmentation is key to be able to land any version of what you're going to implement for your dynamic content generation. Within the framework of understanding your segmentation, it's important to understand the demographics. It's the first jump off into understanding your segmentation, where customers are from, what age they are, what gender split they are, and what income they have. Is critical to be able to build resonance and affinity with a customer for any brand. So this doesn't have to be a big ask. You don't have to have a big data team. As an SMME, you could run your text-based customer list through ChatGPT to understand the gender split. Then secondly, purchase behavior. I think in order to make any kind of sale, you need to understand where your customers' heads are at, and tailoring your personalized messages are important to make that sale within the customer purchase behavior. I think it's also important to note at this stage around purchase behavior, understanding what your customers' spend thresholds are, because you don't want to be serving personalized content of a higher end product to a customer who is within a spend threshold of a lower end product. I think the retailers are doing this very, very well at the moment with AI. They have recommender systems built into their websites where they suggest complementary product to customers based on their purchase behavior. And that's just an example of how some of us are using it in market at the moment. And then lastly, sources of leads. Whether it's customers who drop off or customers that you've newly acquired, it's important to understand where the source of that lead is coming from in order to build a robust segmentation model. This is important to be able to understand how to build journeys, which I'll jump onto in the next slide as part of a step. But you'll see as we start building the presentation and going through the next couple of slides, how important these sources of leads are. So step number 2 for you to consider, journey mapping. So creating a matrix of customer journeys within your customer segmentation and your purchase behavior of your customers is going to help you land how and when you want to implement your dynamic content generation for hyper-personalization. Key factors to note are what your objective of each journey is, timings around each decision in your journey, channel mix, so whether you are serving across multiple channels within that journey, as well as decision points. I'm going to use the example on the left, or I'm not sure if it's on the right of your screen at the moment, but the graphic on screen, as an example of how these factors impact a journey. So the example on the screen at the moment in my graphic is a welcome journey and a customer or onboarding journey. So as you can see, it's built with a starting point around email, and there's only 2 channels being used for the purposes of this exercise and this example. So a customer would receive as a starting point, can everyone see my cursor? I hope so. A customer would receive a welcome emailer, and then you've got to give time for a decision, essentially. And whether the customer opens the email or does not open the email, the journey then splits into 2 branches for the purposes of this example. Once a customer opens an email, if you look at the top part of this graphic that I'm showing on screen at the moment, they would receive a piece of content based on the level of engagement. When they click on that piece of content, they would receive, for this purposes of this example, a social proof, a customer testimonial, because that indicates that the customer is at a higher engagement level. If the customer doesn't click on the content, they would receive another piece of self-service information for the purposes of this example, because there is a lower level of engagement. Where there is no engagement, there's some work needed at the top of that journey to understand why the level of engagement is so low. But for the purposes of this example, if the customer didn't open the original email, they would receive the version of the email in an SMS with a click through to a landing page with all the content. That said, when we look at this example, you could split this out across many, many channels. It doesn't have to be just direct marketing. You could overlay various different channels, and those are part of the considerations you've got to think about on your task of mapping your journeys. Objective, timings for each decision, what your channel mix is that you're going to use, or what channel mix you have available at your disposal, as well as the decision points you want out of each of those touch points. So that is step number 2. I'm going to move on to step number 3. So considering marketing technology and AI. First part of that is creative automation tools. I think we are all strapped for resources at the moment. Depending on your segmentation model you may end up with multiple iterations. Depending on your customer journeys that you've mapped out, you may end up with multiple journeys. And this obviously creates a situation where you have minimal multiple creative iterations to be able to solve for these journeys and the segmentation, as well as generating that dynamic content. So there are quite a few creative automation tools in market at the moment, and I would strongly implore you to look into what you can explore, what you could potentially use to solve for your business needs. At the moment, there are tools in market like Saltra. It's a London-based cloud-based platform that allows for creative automation, or Bannerflow, a Swedish-based cloud platform as well that could be used for creative automation, because there will be many iterations as you're going to need to drive your dynamic content generation. Secondly, within the marketing technology space, I think figuring out what CRM platform works for you is critical. There are many in market at the moment that allow for multiple channels across multiple platforms and multiple touch points and journeys. They all have different advantages and disadvantages. I would strongly also suggest that you explore what works for you. And so there are tools in market at the moment, such as Acoustic, Sales Hub, and HubSpot. You find what works for you and your business, of course. Then lastly, understanding how all of these marketing technology platforms plug into AI integration, or how they integrate with AI. We are at a space where there are certain platforms that offer AI assist, so you don't need to write every 120 iterations of copy. The platform will do so via the language model plugged into AI, essentially. And so you need to look at how you could build efficiencies for your implementation plan within the platforms that you choose to do so. So it's a good sense check, and it's good to do due diligence to understand what level of AI integration each of these platforms that you explore has for you and your business. So I just wanted to share what this potentially could look like. And this is an example used in our business at the moment. So this is an example of an email on a cross-sell journey built. If you look at the left of your screen, I hope you all can see my cursor right now. Based on demographics, I spoke to the segmentation up front at the beginning of my presentation. So depending on demographic, a customer would get served a visual based on their demographics. So in this example, there are 6 versions, and our platform would allow to serve one of those 6 versions depending on what your customer demographic is. Then there is the promotion or product component. So depending on where you are on your purchase behavior, there are 6 versions a customer could potentially get on that cross-sell journey, 6 different versions of product message. And so for this example, the customer would receive iteration number 6. For the left-hand example, the customer would receive iteration number 2, based on where they are in their purchase journey and what product suite they currently have. Then for the purposes of this example, there's an always-on component, because in financial services, trust is a table stake for building affinity and resonance with the customer. So customer testimonial is always built into this version of this example. And then if you look at the left of the screen at the moment, 7 versions of a self-service message. So there's various different things that you want to drive with what you build in your dynamic content generation. For this example particularly, it was important to bring through a self-service component to solve for that customer need of accessibility. And so depending on who the customer is, there would be 1 to 7 different versions of that self-service message served to a customer. And then, of course, to the left-hand side of the screen, because we are marketers, a call to action to drive a sale. So that is just what I wanted to share to show you what this potentially could look like when you know what you know around segmentation, as well as specific platforms that you want to use within the marketing technology space. Then lastly, but not least, step number 4 is understanding what key metrics you would like to measure The 4 that I've mentioned on the screen at the moment are a good starting point because it covers your acquisition customer as well as your retention customer. So first off, understanding response rates. That's going to be a direct reflection of how well your dynamic content has landed with the customer. So across segments within journeys, what does that response rate look like for the content that you're serving? So it's critical to understand where you want to be, what your target is, and where you are tracking and looking at that on a regular basis. Secondly, conversion rates. We work in marketing, so we need to know how well we're converting and how many sales we're bringing in. So that's also just another easy indication to understand how robust your journeys are that you've constructed, as well as how well your content generation is landing with the customer, because affinity and resonance creates action. Then on the second half of the screen, or the lower half of the screen, retention rates. This is important for your existing customers because we're building experiences and journeys and marketing messaging for existing customers as well as new customers. So understanding where you are moving on your retention rate. Are you improving your retention rate with the journeys and the segmentation understanding of your existing customers, and how highly responsive or how responsive generally they are? Then lastly, I think it's important also to understand where you are tracking on customer satisfaction scores. This is a great indication to understand the service component of your business, or the service component of your dynamic content generation. If I use the example on the previous screen, the self-service component built into that example would be a clear indication of how it would impact that customer service or customer satisfaction score, essentially. So those are the 4 key metrics that I would recommend on how you would build your dynamic content generation implementation plan. Key takeouts that I'm going to leave you with today. First of all, start small. Identify where your quick wins are, identify where you want to focus on, whether that be platforms and exploring which platforms suit you, whether that be sales, whether that be new customers, existing customers, or service. Start small and see how you fare on that. Secondly, I think another key takeout, test and learn. Implementation and scaling implementation is test and learn is going to be really important for scaling implementation. So understanding what your testing plan looks like, what the objective of your testing plan is critical to be able to go and test and learn and go forward with how you're going to scale your dynamic content generation. Thirdly, looking at what marketing technology trials you can start using. I wouldn't suggest just jumping in and deciding and making a decision on what marketing technology platforms you're going to use. I mentioned 2 creative automation tools earlier, Saltra and Bannerflow, and I mentioned 3 CRM platforms earlier as well, Acoustic, Salesforce, and HubSpot. A lot of these platforms offer trials, so I would suggest you sweat those trials, and they also offer really robust negotiations on costing. So go into it expecting to trial, see what works for you, and make your decision on what works for you and your business. Then fourthly, training. So I think this is critical. This is a big lever that I think everyone needs to consider and think about. Your dependencies aren't just you, your dependencies are your broader team as well. So to get the buy-in and get the positivity around automation and AI, the team that you are dependent on needs to be trained up. I think it's a critical lever to get that buy-in. There's a lot of angst in the market right now around AI and what that means for people's futures. And a good way to get people's buy-in and alleviate that angst is proper and robust training on all of these platforms and all of this dynamic content generation implementation. And then lastly, I know it doesn't sound fun, but lower your expectations. As you test and learn, no one is getting it right. I did lead with that upfront. We're all learning as we go along. It's a new factor to build into implementation for marketing at the moment. So if you want to focus on just one of those metrics, focus on just that one metrics. You're not going to hit them all at the same time. You're not going to get the best creative. I use examples in my space. I just train people up on how to use tools, and then they resign. So there are always going to be stumbling blocks as you level out and go implement your dynamic content generation in your business. And so expect not amazing things, expect lower things. That is me, guys. And I really thank you for your time today. I hope this was super helpful. I'm going to hand back to our MC. and I'll chat to you guys
Robin,
later.
yeah, your mom is going to be very upset with you, telling you to lower your standards and lower your expectations. I'm sure families around are all freaking out about this. But thank you very, very much, Robin. Really cool insights there. Just stay on for me, because I really love that you ended off with these key insights. We see a lot of companies doing this hyper personalization. A lot of us freak out about the process of getting there, and I love that you've set a really good framework of first focus on your customer segmentation and those journeys. Then think about your technology. Is it scalable? Is it ready to take it on? And then last but not least, think about what are you actually going to measure as success? Like, even if you did implement this, would this even be successful? How would we know? And those tools that you mentioned and those next steps, is it at all possible during our next session for you to just be able to pop some of those names into the chat for everybody, just to be able to go and read up and find more detail on? It would be really, really good.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Awesome, Robin. Then thank you very much for your time this morning. You will be joining us in the Q&A later on. So if you have any questions for Robin today based on what she's presented, at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat and there's a Q&A. Please do paste any questions for our speakers in the Q&A box. That's where we're going to be selecting the questions that are asked at the end of the session today for the last sort of 10 minutes or so of our session. So please do pop those in the chat. Lovely to see everybody engaging in the chat. I see so much really good engagement there today. And Natalie saying, where can we connect with you further, Robin? So Robin, please do pop your LinkedIn link in the chat as well too, for everyone to go and find you online, or just go follow the IAB on LinkedIn. They have posted some recent sort of tags to her as well. And Karis obviously just mentioning a very good well done to this as well too. Everybody just saying hello and really enjoying the content today. Nice to have you all with us on this webinar as part of the IAB. If you guys would like to, like I said, ask any questions from our speakers, use the Q&A, or just tell us a bit more about where you're from in the chat as well too. We look forward to engaging you there. Right, let's move on to our second speaker for the day. I'm very excited for this conversation. Now that we've laid the really good framework on the technology, the customer segmentation, let's talk about what this means from a dynamic content creation in practice perspective by chatting to Kangalani Dziba. He's the Group Divisional Head of PR and Influencer Partnerships at Wrapped Creative Agency. He's a seasoned award-winning brand communications specialist with a master's degree in brand leadership. Kangalani brings extensive experience from various senior integrated leadership roles across the marketing mix. His expertise lies in creative strategy building and execution, focusing on influencer marketing, public relations, partnerships, and trade actions. He has worked with notable clients like L'Oreal, Dark and Lovely, TFG, Diageo, Pernod Ricard, the Heineken brands, as well as Signal Hill products as well too. And so what a great, great man to come and chat to us today about all that he's learned about dynamic content creation in his world. So Kangalani, nice to have you with us. While I've got a quick intro for you, do you want to throw another stab back at Robin? She was going on about award winning. Do you want to just quickly throw a stab back at her?
I actually do. I was listening attentively and waiting for this opportunity to be able to respond to that. So thank you for the opportunity, Robin. It certainly is about awards for us from an agency point of view, because we want to prove that we are excellent at what we do as agency to our clients. But I think what I definitely do agree with you on there is certainly creating content with KPIs in mind, and obviously meeting those objectives, which is certainly what this presentation is going to be demonstrating in terms of how we bear in mind the KPIs from a client perspective, but also resonating with consumers, which is quite essential for the work that we do.
Beautiful, Kangalani. Thank you so much. Then the stage is yours. Go and have a good one. And if anybody has any questions for Kangalani or Robin, pop them in the Q&A. Stage is yours.
Awesome. So, Danita, I think this is such an incredibly important topic for us as marketers and as advertisers, because this is the world that we are in, and we can't be operating from an abyss, right? So how do we look at interesting ways of integrating AI as part of what we do? And I think I'll be able to deliver to that by first outlining what this presentation of mine has in store for you guys in terms of looking at what fostering collaboration between marketers, creators, as well as technologists as a company has done for us and has enabled us to be able to achieve. I think we also need to understand how we have harnessed the full potential of dynamic content generation, and also combining artistic vision with technical expertise, the importance of delivering compelling brand narratives, which is at the center of what we do as marketers and advertisers, and then finally having an overview of the industry and really just relaying some insights that have also come through from a research perspective. But before we get into that, I think it's important for us to also note that we are in the business of creating compelling content, and for anything to move off the shelf or for services to be rendered, at least in the work that we do, it needs to be done in a compelling way. And this is essentially what consumers actually care about. So how do we go about achieving this? I think as a company, it really speaks to the importance of integration between brands as well as their agencies, and being able to deliver, to Robin's point, on key KPIs and resonating with audiences. I think within agencies as well, it speaks fundamentally to the integration between the different pillars that exist within the mix of agencies. So by this, I'm specifically speaking to strategy, creative, public relations, social, as well as production when it comes down to it. I think we are certainly in a new era where we need to understand different disciplines and how these make sense in the work that we do. I think it is also quite important to understand the benefit of technology, but also the benefit of having human interaction in the mix of that, because we're then able to pick up what is actually working. And I think we'll speak to it a little bit later on in terms of testing and how do we then modify campaigns as we are going forward. So in terms of how we've achieved this at Wrapped Creative, and at least as a group, there is a specific strategy and framework that we follow, which I feel informs all of the creative that comes out of our agency, insofar as understanding what the business goal is, what the business challenge is, which will then help us in our deciphering what the key insight is and what matters in market, highlighting the brand role, speaking to this strategic platform, and finally arriving at what matters and how that can then be executed via the various disciplines of communication. When we are looking at harnessing the full potential of dynamic content, I think it would be remiss of us to not acknowledge the fact that I think it has given us time back, as creators, to be able to think innovatively on how we approach things, whilst also allowing us to create effective content in a much faster and scaled way. Caution definitely does, though, need to be made around quality versus quantity, insofar as it's easy to create content in this day and age. However, remembering the insight that consumers are faced with so much, or are contending with so much platforms, so much content, and so what we create needs to be effective. And finally, I think a note for marketers, it is acknowledging the importance of being able to invest in this sort of innovation that is taking place. So I'm going to show you an example of what all of this basically speaks to in terms of the insights delivered, and how one of our partners have been able to deliver on this, particularly looking at this example. Right. So what this particular example does, I think it showcases the importance of innovating and moving with the times of where we're at in terms of how broadcast has been impacted by the advent of new technologies, but also looking at how click-throughs and conversions are important in terms of reach for what we do from a broadcast perspective, but also when looking at clients, how moving product off shelf can be measured through the content that is then put out there. And I think the results speak for themselves based off of the example that I've showcased. But before we move on, I think it's quite important for us to understand what are some of the best practices in terms of dynamic content generation, insofar as understanding and segmenting our audience, because we're not just creating content for the sake of it or for everyone at the same time. It is also about setting clear goals in terms of what needs to be achieved. Are we moving product off shelves? Are we trying to get more consumers listening in to a particular program? It's about understanding what the goals are. And then I think using data as well as analytics to be able to assess where we're going and performance, personalizing content and making it interactive. As I said, consumers are consistently battling with or contending with various brands and platforms trying to speak to them. So how does our content then stand out in order for it to be successful? I think it is also about testing as well as optimizing, and finally speaking to content being mobile friendly, because consumers are working with multiple screens. And so if content lives across different platforms, it will then allow us to reach a far much wider audience. I think when also looking at the importance of combining artistic vision with technical expertise, it's about acknowledging that within these agencies that we are working in, we've got people that are extremely talented from a creative perspective, and they are there to fulfill a particular role, right? Technology, however, I think should be seen as an opportunity to be able to enhance that technical expertise. And that is what essentially AI offers us. And I think it basically really allows us to explore different avenues of how we then, syndicate our communication. Few examples that I've got for you as well, just in the group, in terms of brands that we've worked with that have seamlessly integrated, AI into it. Strongbow, as I'm sure many of you know, until recently was the #1 cider. And we had the opportunity to be able to work specifically on the relaunch of the brand, where AI was an essential part of what we were doing and how this was particularly integrated. We partnered with AI as well as digital artists to give our Strongbow characters a disruptive digital appearance, and established a social platform where we could exist and interact with consumers. And they essentially embodied the essence of the brand. Now, these are characters where, they would speak authentically and collaborate from speaking and advocating about the brand. But from our perspective, as PR and influencer practitioners, it was also important to complement that with actual human beings who would be able to dial up the messaging, which you'll be able to see as we explore some of the examples of the work that has been conducted. What was important as well when looking at these people is, what are their personas and how do they then resonate with who we are then speaking to? So being bubbly, being fresh, being crisp, bright, inclusive, optimistic, bougie, but not pretentious. These were key things that we were looking out for. And these are things obviously that matter to this specific consumer that we are speaking to. So to be able to deliver this, we were then able to partner with people like Coco and there, as well as Fresh Caddy, but there are plenty others that we have also partnered with that embodied the AI personality, but also could connect in an emotional way with consumers on digital platforms. I think finally, it was also about the execution that we had utilizing digital billboards. So dynamic content doesn't only look at mailers, or smaller platforms. There are bigger platforms such as digital out of home that become a very important part of what we do to be able to deliver this communication. I think it is also quite important to note that we can't do this without understanding the importance of delivering compelling brand narratives. And this essentially speaks to what brands stand for and who they're trying to speak to. And this needs to be done in an authentic and believable way. So for us, with Strongbow being another example, this was done through understanding that we are a brand that is about uniting people who are coming from various cultures, subcultures, and love and have different various passion points, such as music, fashion, and you name it. So really, these are all brought together by the brand, which was then, in terms of our campaign line, Sisonke was then anchored by that. Cool. This then allowed us to be able to tell compelling stories utilizing media platforms and media channels, insofar as paid as well as earned publications that were able to cover this messaging and the relaunch of our brand. I think another example that as of recently has done really well, and I think has positioned us from a company perspective in very good stead from a global perspective, is the Soul campaign, which was really around, or the brand is really about communicating positive vibrations and positive energy into the market, hence the sun, right? And this was a way of us sort of resonating, I guess, with our Gen Z target market in order for us to provide them some respite from their everyday busy lives and speaking to positive affirmations that showcases that they can achieve the things that they want to do, etc. Cool. So finally, or at least ultimately, what we want to achieve is that, or understand is that concepts are important for us to be able to deliver great communication on various platforms, including the digitalization of such content and delivering experiences that will allow us to be able to connect with consumers through media on various platforms. This is so that they are able to understand who we are as brands, but also what we stand for and how we are able to communicate that effectively, thus being able to give them an opportunity to build meaningful connections with brands, thereby sharing compelling stories that further entrenches us in their memory structures. And I think this is important because then, you know, further content that is generated from them allows us to reach a far much wider audience. So what am I saying essentially? I think an overview is it can be summed up in three. That one, humans are at the center of the creative process, and this essentially means that it's not that it is not through a partner in creation or technology that is, but rather it is a helping partner that allows us as agencies as well as marketers to be able to explore ways to create in an impactful manner. I think AI technologies are here to stay and we cannot run away from that reality. However, we need to be able to use them in a way that is integrated with what we already do to be able to benefit the creative process, as well as develop new ways and new frontiers for us to be able to explore. And then I think finally, it is important to understand that in an environment where consumers have so much to contend with, quality over quantity is going to be important, and we need to be the people who are responsible enough to safeguard that in terms of measuring the importance of what we're producing against KPIs and whether or not it is going to be able to meet, I guess, those KPIs set out by our clients. So that is all I've got for you today, but always happy to engage further and hear some thoughts from everyone else.
Well, so far, it's a lot of really engaged emojis coming up on the screen, lots of claps and applause. Even Robin in the chat is telling you, yes, yes, yes. Loving the conversation we're having about the mix between that human experience and technology and how we find that sort of world of creativity and technological innovation, how those two worlds come together. So, Kangalani, thank you very, very much for your time today and some great insights there. Robin, could we have your camera on and have you join us in our panel discussion? I'd love to have you contribute here to the Q&A. And so, ladies and gents, we are now in the Q&A section. So please do go to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, pop some of your questions in. We will prioritize every single one of your questions that come through today for as long as as we still have time, another sort of 12 minutes or so of the Q&A that we will do until we jump into the end of our webinar today and throw forward to what's coming up next month as part of the IAB Insight series. Cool. And thanks, Mawetu, for your message in the chat. Just a note, we have to only ask questions in the Q&A section. So please do transfer that question across to the Q&A and I'll get it answered for you shortly. Let's start with something simple for both of you to maybe answer. Just something interesting that we seem to cover a lot when it comes to AI and innovation. Should the industry's view on AI be one of a threat, and how should we be responding to this perceived threat that still seems to dominate the narrative around the transition towards AI? I know it's been covered a lot, and I'm sure people might be yawning and rolling their eyes at the same question, but it's still coming up in marketing brands, in the agencies at the moment. How do you guys view that? Robin, we'll start with you. You've had a bit of a breather while I give Kangalani a chance to think about his answer.
Thanks. I think my perspective, and I touched on it earlier, is that the more robust the training is, the better, the more robust people's understanding of the tools that they're using and the plan for how to implement dynamic content generation and integrating AI into day-to-day business, the better it is to address those fears and alleviate those concerns. The early enough you get buy-in, the better. And so my view is that I think doing that properly is probably the best way to alleviate all of those uncomfortabilities people have around AI and what it means for the future of the work that they're doing.
Great. Kangalani, something to add to that?
Yeah, so in my perspective, honestly, and it was yesterday where I was listening to Elon Musk actually speak on this. Well, at least he was being quoted at the Cannes Festival, where he was actually saying AI will be a threat to people who refuse to accept that it's here, right? And I think for me, it's more about how do we enhance our skills utilizing AI as part of that process. It is something that is definitely here to stay. And so how do we better use it to be able to create better, to be able to create more in an effective way? And I mean, it certainly does give back time to many creatives, which allows us to be able to create more for our clients. So I definitely think we need to embrace it more than run away from it. And yeah, that's my perspective on it.
As an agency, one of the things that we've tried to understand, or at least use as the narrative, is that we all need to, as creatives, as marketers, as advertisers, need to understand what end we're trying to achieve. What is the business objective? How are we solving that business objective? AI is a means to that end. It's not an end in itself. And I think a lot of people have confused that and try to make AI the end in itself. It's the end of creative storytelling. It's no, you're still going to tell it what story to tell. You still need to know what stories will change the minds of consumers. And so it's really important to understand that AI is the means to that end and not the end in itself. Now, Rachel, I see you haven't transferred your question to the chat, to the Q&A section. So I'll ask it from the chat anyway, and I'll be a little bit naughty today. Oh no, you've already deleted it, so I'm sure it'll come up in the Q&A in a second. Steve, oh no, there it comes. Thank you, Mawetu. So let me answer your question live. It says, for Kangi, from your personal perspective, how can we better understand our Gen Z market to deliver messaging and creative content that truly resonates with them? Because obviously, even with the leveraging of AI, you still need to understand the target customer to do that. And we really still are trying to understand Gen Z. How do you find that fits into the context of your presentation?
Yeah, so I think this question is so layered and we need another session on it, but I'll do my best to answer it insofar as saying that, first of all, we'd be making a huge mistake as creators, as strategists, or anyone that's in this industry to speak on their behalf. It's very important to speak with Gen Zs because they're very opinionated. They know exactly what they want from brands, from society, from their politics, right? And you know, what we create and what we do cannot be devoid from that. And how do we become a part of that conversation? It's about being on the platforms that they're on. I mean, you look at TikTok, and I think that is such a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to get into their minds and understand how they approach life, how they approach the world. And so being cognizant of, you know, what they're passionate about, what they're saying, how they're saying it is quite important, and integrating it into the work that we do. Otherwise, it really becomes obsolete, right? Because we're no longer going to, or we're not just creating content for millennials and above. These are people that actually exist. And so they do need to be considered in what we do. And I think finally, creating with Gen Zs is very important. So the makeup of our teams is incredibly important. You know, and I mean this when we are ideating in boardrooms, when we're putting together strategies. Therein are some of the insights that we need, and we have done quite successfully, I think, in some parts of the business where we are listening to the voices of Gen Zs and including them in the deliverables to our clients via our strategies and communication.
You have done it well, and you won awards for it, even if Robin doesn't acknowledge them. Robin, the next question is for you, and it's quite provocative, and I'm very excited for you to dive into this one. Steve Smith says, Robin, how do you best navigate, particularly in your industry, the argument of, I want to talk to a real person versus automated responses, WhatsApp add-ons, bots, etc. in this automation journey? Customer service in this country is like one of our like biggest challenges, and we really do struggle to try and get to just talk to a person to solve our problems for us. How have you navigated that?
Oh, I saw the question. So thanks, Steve. So, I mean, if you know, I think three things. If you know your customer well enough, you will know what is a pain point. And so identify what is going to require human interaction versus what a bot can solve for is going to be critical in your journey mapping, for example. If you have robust segmentation and you have enough insights to understand your customer, as well as enough customer service analytics to understand what are pain points for customers. For example, when it comes to money or bank accounts, someone wants to talk to someone directly. You're not going to want to resolve that with a bot. I think that's a little bit of understanding your customer needs and being close to your being as close as possible to your customer. We're never going to be in a space where everything is going to be a bot and everything is going to be a WhatsApp chat. So I think that's the one layer of discerning whether this part of the customer journey and that part of the customer journey is a bot. I think a lot of what is helpful is having regular reviews of your customer service scores, your customer service insights. It's not just a satisfaction score. It's first resolution times. It's how quickly these things are getting resolved and the number of complaints, net promoter scores, to understand where the gaps are in your approach with the balance of bots versus human interaction. So I hope that was helpful. I think those are factors that I think you need to think about when you map out what needs to be a bot and what needs to be a human. We're never going to take away the human component.
It actually goes back to Mawetu's question earlier on, Steve's question, and a lot that's happening in the Q&A at the moment. All goes back to what you were sharing in your presentation earlier, Robin, is it doesn't begin with AI integration. It begins with understanding the consumer and building up proper understandings of how to maximize that journey, segmenting audiences, understanding who they are, because you cannot personalize that which you don't know. Knowing your customer, knowing where their pain points are will help you learn how AI or these chatbots, etc., can help you solve that. So great question, Steve. Thank you for that one. Let's go to an anonymous. Yes, go ahead.
Kailani has something to add.
I think that also highlights an opportunity around education, right? Insofar as what is this meant to do for me and what are the benefits for it? And I know we live, and it's a polarizing opinion, right? Because we live in a very divided sort of world, society, people who have access, people who don't. But it certainly identifies an opportunity that we should take up at some point. And it would be interesting to see how we do more, even as advertisers, to educate consumers about it.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
Sorry, if I can just add, the dynamic content generation component is then important because what parts of that do you build content that educates a customer? And so I think that's always important to keep in the top of your mind, because whether it's financial education, whether it's education on how to use your product or how to use your services, I think that's an important layer to keep as a content pillar as you build your implementation plan and your content strategy.
Love it. Guys, the questions in the Q&A are getting incredibly provocative, and I'm so excited to tackle this with the two of you. You're both really smart people, so I'm very excited to see what you say. One of them is even anonymous. It's that provocative, but it's about like trying to get buy-in from internal businesses. So thanks for this question. It says, how does one implement AI in an organization that resists change? Robin, do you want to try and take a stab at that first?
Yeah, I'll take a stab. So I think in my findings or my experience, I think it's important to test and learn, first of all, like build a use case for what benefit implementing AI in your day-to-day work would have. Start small. I think I'm sounding like a broken record saying that over and over. Where you have the opportunity, I think formalizing it and creating a think tank or a committee that drives AI in your business is super helpful as well. You address a lot of concerns by doing that. Lobbying in your day-to-day interactions with people about the benefit of AI as well helps a lot as well to address that resistance to change. And I think where you have the opportunity, formal change management methodology, what the current state and what the as-is state, painting that picture to your stakeholders as to what that would look like, is super helpful to address that resistance to change.
I think
anything you want to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I think resistance, if we can at least understand where resistance comes from, right? It's because of a fear, not understanding something. So when you are then able to bring in expertise and people who will enlighten, those who are resistant, I guess, to the change, I don't think we would not be able to get it over the line at some point. Obviously, it needs to be consistent, educating and reiterating how it's also going to be beneficial for the business. Otherwise, we do become obsolete, right? Because this is the world that we are living in. But I 100% also stand by what Robin has said insofar as starting small, as well as testing and learning as you go along, because that will empower you to be able to take on more, as opposed to taking on this beast that you know nothing about, right? Yeah. So start small, test and learn as you go along, and bring in expertise to drive the education around the innovation.
Most of the resistance would probably be that they don't see the benefit or have not been given enough information to make informed decisions. So do your research, have a fully like a sort of bulletproof case to be able to put forward to the business on why this matters for the company, not just, oh, it'll be cool, everyone's doing it, let's do it ourselves. But for us as a business, here's how it fits in and here's how it works. All right, you ready for the juicy bits? Oh, I'm going to combine two questions together because they are similar in their essence. And obviously the topic of today is talking about dynamic content creation. We need to understand South Africa's context when it comes to understanding dynamic content creation. So Themba Msibi and Lala Dlamini have both asked very similar questions. I'll read them both out to you now. Themba asks, how do we ensure that our AI tech-driven campaigns do not exclude the broader South African audience, considering the country's socioeconomic context that does not enable everyone to have access to AI tech? And Lala, just further elaborating on a very similar type of question for both speakers, has there been any platforms that have been able to process data feedback that is not in English? Do you feel that enough is being done to accommodate the various languages and dialects in the local market of South Africa? So I guess the question really is trying to understand, it's great. We can hyper-personalize, we can go at scale producing content. But what about South Africa? What about our very unique challenges to do with language diversity, cultural diversity, access concerns when it comes to this kind of initiative? Might work for America, but will it work for SA? And how do we overcome those? Any thoughts so far? Kangalani, maybe in the PR space, quite interesting that this might come up for you.
Yeah, I mean, with my limited knowledge in this regard, but with what I know and have worked on, I think a hybrid approach is very much important for the context of South Africa. We cannot prioritize one over the other. And understanding, once again, the socioeconomic issues, it would be a disjustice for any brand to go on a tangent and just focus on technology and forget about their other consumers. I think therein the opportunity around the addressing of language, there certainly is more that can be done. And I think brands need to see more opportunity in terms of working with ALS, African language stations in particular, because those are the target market that we are speaking to in that regard tend to be more on the traditional platforms. And so it is important for us to be able to acknowledge that a hybrid approach is going to be important, and working with those who have the expertise to be able to deliver on what we need delivered on as brands as well.
Robin, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, if I can just add, in terms of solving for South African nuances in what AI puts out, I think we all know it's dependent on what you put in as a prompt engineer and what you're asking for, you're going to get out. And I think from what I know, there are a lot of platforms right now where you can plug in your nuances, whether that be language nuances or your customer segmentation. You could plug that in as to what you get out. So if you want a copy deck for an SMS, I don't know, I'm using a random example, around specific languages, there are actual paid versions of these AI platforms that you could plug in your model to get specific personalized output out of it. So whilst I don't know of any platforms that are specific to our South African nuances, you could tweak what you're getting out versus what you're putting in, essentially. And then with regards to access, I think I echo the sentiments that Kangalani's just said as well around understanding where your customer is. And it's not just AI. If you're an omni-channel business, you're not just talking to your customer via AI. If you know they're using WhatsApp most frequently, and so why would you only talk to them via an AI-produced content strategy? So it's important to have a multiple channel mix, ALS radio stations and everything else, as Kangalani mentioned, and make sure that you're omni-channel enough to allow and solve for that customer accessibility.
Great. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Kangalani. We've only got like another minute or two to get through the questions, and there are quite a few really important ones. Let's try to keep our next answer short and sweet. Whatever we don't get through now, we'll try and respond to on a mailer after the fact. But let's go with Crystal Sequeni's question. It asks, what's the best way to test out dynamic content with your audience if it's something you're sure you want to do? A/B testing or full-on rollout and adapting based on the response? Thanks, Crystal. Robin, do you want to start on that one?
Thanks, Crystal. I think for me, the obvious answer is A/B testing. As a responsible marketer, going full tilt to go and implement an AI or content generation strategy without understanding what output you're going to get or what the result will be is a little bit irresponsible. My 2 cents. So, and the risk is way too high. So the safer bet for me would be A/B testing. That said, all of those platforms that I've popped into the chat allow for automated A/B testing. You don't manually have to go do that. So if you are considering A/B testing, I think really strongly about what platforms you're going to invest in from a marketing technology perspective as well.
Can I just ask before you get your input on that, Kangalani? It actually ties into another question that I think will combine quite beautifully with what I'm sure you'll answer. It's an anonymous attendee that says, you guys have spoken quite a lot about how AI can be used to benefit as a benefit and not meant to replace human the element. But before implementing AI into your business, can we please just speak a little bit about some of the negative shortcomings that could arise? This is after the McDonald's AI disaster. We as a business and our clients are prepared. We want to make sure that we're understanding what those risks are that could happen in that mix. As Robin mentioned, you don't want to go, I almost said a very inappropriate word, of something to the wall about it. You just want to go big or go home, come into a disaster like we've seen there before. As a PR sort of rep, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think Robin can probably delve more from a brand perspective. But from what I know, I mean, it is quite expensive, right, to be able to venture into this specific sort of area. So you must be cognizant of that. And I think testing before you send out to a larger market will enable us not to spend too much money or waste too much money on campaigns. But Robin, I don't know if you've got any further views on that.
I mean, my view is that, and this is a very typical marketer question, but I think it's important to have regular reviews to understand what's happening in market and what worked for you, what didn't work creatively, what the output out of this automation and AI integration. I think it's important to have very clear and robust CI guidelines, because that is what you're plugging into whatever your content generation that is coming out. And then I think it's important to have regular customer service to understand whether the stuff that you're putting out is landing. There are risks, definitely, but it's a human driving the machine at the end of the day. So you need to do your due diligence and be really, really strict with sign-off process, with reviews, to make sure that you don't land in a position where Kangalani's got to go do a whole campaign that rescues what you put out. So I think it's important to make sure that you're doing your housekeeping, so to speak, on what output is coming out of whatever system you use.
He won't need to be rescuing you because he'll be winning awards for brilliant campaigns, I'm sure.
Yeah, fair.
Robin, Kangalani, I appreciate both of your time today. Great insights. I've never seen such an engaged Q&A and chat from the session today. Dynamic content creation definitely does seem to be a thing that you two are both leading in your industries, and we really appreciate you sharing your insights. I'm sure the conversation will continue in your LinkedIn DM, so do keep an eye on those as well. Both of you, thank you very, very much. That does wrap up our session for today's IAB Insight series, and we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Looking forward to next month's content. It's going to be an epic event, so please do register for it. We cannot wait to see you there. The topic for next month is the new era, creator economy, video, podcasts, and live streaming. All the big content conversations to come next month on the IAB Insight series. Another huge big thank you for all of you for attending our session today. We're really, really grateful to have you here with us and look forward to a lovely weekend ahead. Big thank you to all of our sponsors, Biz Community, Ornico, the Marketing Association of South Africa, Everlytic, Roamwork, and do not forget to follow the IAB on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. Have a good rest of the end of the week. Bye-bye from us.